When Ethan Cole watched a young woman in a wheelchair count out exact change for a single birthday cupcake, alone, exhausted, wearing clothes that had seen too many winters, he didn't know that one simple invitation would shatter everything he thought he understood about family, survival, and second chances. What started as his 7-year-old daughter's stubborn refusal to let a stranger celebrate alone became the beginning of something none of them saw coming. A love story built not on grand gestures, but on the quiet, terrifying courage it takes to let someone in after you've spent years learning how to live without anyone at all. If you're watching from somewhere in the world right now, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stick around, because what happens next will remind you why small moments of kindness can change absolutely everything. The February wind cut through Cincinnati like a promise it had no intention of keeping. Ethan Cole felt it the moment he pushed open the door to Riverside Cafe, his daughter Mia's small hand tucked firmly in his. The warmth inside hit them both, the smell of coffee and cinnamon, the low hum of afternoon conversations, the kind of ordinary comfort that made the cold outside feel like something from another world entirely. "Can we sit by the window, Dad?" Mia tugged at his jacket, her 7-year-old voice bright with the kind of hope that hadn't yet learned to expect disappointment. Ethan looked down at her, at the wild curls she'd inherited from her mother, at the gap-toothed smile that still caught him off guard sometimes because it was so much like Sarah's, and nodded. "Yeah, kiddo, window seat it is." They'd been coming here every Saturday for the past 6 months, ever since Ethan finally admitted to himself that the house had gotten too quiet, that grief had a way of filling rooms until there wasn't space left for actual living. The cafe had become their routine, their small rebellion against the silence that waited for them at home. Mrs. Delaney, the owner, waved from behind the counter, a woman in her 60s with flour-dusted hands and the kind of eyes that had seen enough of life to know when not to ask questions. "The usual?" she called out. "Please," Ethan replied, guiding Mia toward their regular table near the front window. Outside, the street was gray and wet, the afternoon light already starting to fade even though it wasn't quite 3 o'clock. Mia climbed into her chair and immediately started pulling crayons from her backpack, spreading them across the table with the focused intensity of someone embarking on serious work. Ethan watched her for a moment, the way she bit her bottom lip when she concentrated, the way her small hands moved with surprising precision, and felt the familiar ache settle in his chest. Sarah should be here. She should be the one watching Mia color, should be the one ordering hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, should be the one making plans for dinner and weekend trips and all the ordinary moments that added up to a life. But Sarah wasn't here, and Ethan was still trying to figure out how to be enough for both of them. The cafe door opened again, letting in another blast of cold air and the sound of struggle. Ethan looked up. A young woman was trying to maneuver a wheelchair through the doorway, an old manual chair that had clearly seen better days, its wheels catching on the threshold as she pushed forward with visible effort. She was maybe mid-20s, thin in a way that spoke of missed meals rather than fashion, wearing a gray sweater that had been washed so many times the fabric had gone soft and shapeless. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her face held the kind of exhaustion that went deeper than lack of sleep, the exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting uphill for so long they'd forgotten what level ground felt like. Every head in the cafe turned toward her, and then, just as quickly, every head turned away. Ethan watched it happen, the way the couple at the corner table suddenly found their coffee fascinating, the way the businessman by the counter became intensely focused on his phone, the way the teenage barista looked anywhere except at the woman now navigating the narrow space between tables. It was a choreographed dance of avoidance, performed with the practiced ease of people who'd learned to make invisibility an art form. The woman's jaw tightened. She kept moving, eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge the awkward silence that had settled over the room like snow. She made it to the counter, one wheel catching on a chair leg before she adjusted course. Up close, Ethan could see the strain in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the wheel rims with the white-knuckled determination of someone who'd learned the hard way that nobody was coming to help. "Hey, Lena." Mrs. Delaney's voice was gentle, the kind of gentle that knew better than to make a big deal out of things. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." The woman, Lena, managed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Thanks, Mrs. D. The usual? Actually, Lena reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a worn wallet, counting bills and coins with careful precision. Could I get one of those chocolate cupcakes? The small ones, and a candle, if you have one. Mrs. Delaney's expression shifted, something that might have been recognition or maybe just sadness. Of course, honey. 1 cupcake, 1 candle, coming right up. Lena counted out exact change onto the counter. $3. Not a penny more. Not a penny less. The kind of transaction that spoke of budgets counted down to the last cent, of knowing exactly what you could afford and staying firmly within those boundaries. Keep the change, Mrs. Delaney said softly, pushing a quarter back across the counter. I can't. Yes, you can. It's your birthday. Humor an old woman. Lena's throat worked. She took the quarter, slipped it back into her wallet, and waited while Mrs. Delaney pulled a small chocolate cupcake from the display case and stuck a single white candle in the top. You need a light? Mrs. Delaney asked. I'll do it at the table, thanks. Lena took the small paper plate, balanced it carefully on her lap, and turned her wheelchair toward the dining area. The cafe had filled up since she'd arrived, every table occupied, every seat taken. Except one, a small table by the window tucked into the corner where the afternoon light was starting to turn gold and uncertain. She rolled toward it, her movements efficient despite the obvious wear on the chair's mechanics. When she reached the table, she executed a practiced pivot and positioned herself so she could look out the window, her back to the rest of the cafe. Ethan realized he'd been watching the entire exchange. He looked down quickly, ashamed of his own voyeurism, but the image had already burned itself into his memory. The careful counting of change, the worn wallet, the exhausted focus in Lena's eyes, the way she moved through space like she was used to fighting for every inch of it. Dad? Mia's voice was quiet, unusually so. That lady is all alone. Yeah, kiddo, I noticed. On her birthday. Yeah. Mia put down her crayon, a purple one she'd been using to color what might have been a dragon or possibly a very ambitious cloud. Her small face was serious, her eyes fixed on the woman by the window. That's sad. It is sad. We should do something. Ethan felt something twist in his chest, equal parts pride and fear. This was so much like Sarah, this immediate empathy, this inability to see suffering without wanting to fix it. He'd loved that about his wife. He'd also watched it wear her down, watched her give and give until there was nothing left, until the cancer took what remained. Mia, honey, sometimes people want to be alone. Not on their birthday. Mia's voice carried absolute certainty, the kind only a 7-year-old could muster. Nobody should be alone on their birthday. That's a rule. That's not exactly... Can we invite her to sit with us? Ethan looked at his daughter, then at the woman by the window. Lena had placed the cupcake on the table in front of her, the single candle still unlit. She wasn't eating it. She wasn't doing anything. She was just sitting there, staring at it like it was both everything and nothing, like it represented some promise she'd stopped believing in a long time ago. Please, Dad? Mia's hand found his. Please? We have space, and we have hot chocolate coming, and I have extra crayons. The weight of the moment settled on Ethan like a physical thing. He could feel Sarah somewhere, could almost hear her voice saying what she always said. The world doesn't get better because we look away. It gets better because somebody decides to look closer. He'd spent the last 2 years trying to protect Mia from the world's sharp edges, trying to build a safe space where grief couldn't reach them. But maybe that wasn't what either of them needed. Maybe what they needed was exactly what Mia was asking for. To reach out, to connect, to remember that being alive meant being willing to see other people's pain and not turn away from it. Okay, he said quietly, we can ask. But if she says no, we respect that. Deal? Deal! Mia was already sliding off her chair, gathering up her crayons with the determined efficiency of a general preparing for battle. Ethan stood, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. They crossed the cafe together, Mia's small hand in his, and approached the table by the window. Lena must have heard them coming, but she didn't turn around. Her shoulders tensed, a defensive posture that spoke of too many bad experiences with people approaching from behind. "Excuse me?" Ethan kept his voice gentle, non-threatening. "I'm sorry to interrupt." Lena turned slowly, and Ethan got his first good look at her face. She was younger than he'd thought, mid-20s at most, with sharp features softened by exhaustion and dark eyes that held an unsettling combination of wariness and resignation. Beautiful, he thought distantly, in the way things are beautiful when they've been worn down to their essential elements. "Yes?" Her voice was careful, neutral, giving away nothing. "My daughter and I—" Ethan gestured to Mia, who was practically vibrating with barely contained energy beside him. "We heard it's your birthday. We were wondering if you'd like to join us at our table. We have hot chocolate coming, and apparently Mia has extra crayons she's very eager to share." Lena stared at him. Just stared, like she was trying to solve a complicated equation. Her eyes flicked to Mia, then back to Ethan, then to the cafe around them as if checking for hidden cameras or signs of a prank. "I'm fine here," she said finally. "But thank you." "Are you sure?" Mia piped up, and Ethan felt her pull free from his hand to step closer. "Because it's your birthday, and birthdays are supposed to be happy, and sitting all alone doesn't look very happy." A muscle worked in Lena's jaw. "I appreciate the thought, but I'm used to— Nobody should be used to being alone on their birthday." Mia's voice carried the unshakable moral certainty of someone who hadn't yet learned that the world didn't always work the way it should. "That's not how it's supposed to be. My mom used to say that birthdays are for celebrating that you're here, that you matter, and you can't celebrate if you're by yourself. That doesn't make sense." Ethan's breath caught. Mia didn't talk about Sarah often, not directly, not like this. He put a hand on her shoulder, gentle, grounding. Lena's expression cracked just for a second. Something raw and vulnerable flickered across her face before she locked it down again. "Your mom sounds like she was a smart person." "She was the smartest." Mia's voice went quiet. "She died when I was 5, but Dad remembers all the stuff she said and he tells me so I don't forget." The silence that followed was different than the awkward quiet that had greeted Lena when she'd entered the cafe. This was heavier, more honest, the silence of people recognizing each other's scars. "I'm sorry," Lena said, and her voice had changed, less defensive, more human. "That's really hard." "Yeah, it is." Mia nodded seriously. "That's why we know about being sad on important days, and that's why we don't want you to be sad on yours. So will you please, please, please come sit with us? We have a really good table, and Dad lets me put extra marshmallows in my hot chocolate, and I'm working on a picture of a dragon that I could really use a second opinion on." Ethan watched Lena's face, saw the war playing out behind her eyes. She wanted to say no. He could see that clearly. She wanted to refuse, to protect herself behind the walls she'd obviously spent years building. But there was something else, too. A hunger, maybe, or just exhaustion with her own isolation. "You really don't have to," Ethan said gently. "But the offer's genuine. No strings, no expectations, just company, if you want it." Lena looked down at the cupcake on the table in front of her, at the unlit candle, at the $3 she'd spent on this one small symbol of celebration. When she looked back up, something in her had shifted. "Okay," she said, so quietly it was almost a whisper. "Okay, thank you." Mia's face lit up like someone had flipped a switch. "Yes." "Okay, so you should bring your cupcake, obviously, because we're totally going to sing to you later. And do you like coloring? Because I have this green that's really good for dragon scales if you need it." Lena's lips twitched, the ghost of a real smile. "I haven't colored in a long time." "Then you're definitely out of practice. Good thing I'm here to help." Mia grabbed the cupcake plate with surprising care and turned back toward their table. "Come on! Our table's the best one because you can see the street and also the pastry case, so you get like 2 views for the price of 1. Ethan met Lena's eyes, offering what he hoped was an encouraging expression. "She's not usually this assertive. You've apparently activated her hospitality mode." "I can see that." Lena positioned her hands on the wheel rims, then paused. "I'm Lena, by the way. Lena Harper." "Ethan Cole. And the tornado currently rearranging our table to make room for you is Mia." "Nice to meet you both." Lena pushed forward, following Mia across the cafe. This time, when heads turned, Ethan stared back until they looked away. If they were going to do this, they were going to do it right. Their table by the window suddenly felt fuller, warmer. Mia had already cleared space, pushing her crayons to one side and carefully placing the cupcake in the center, like it was a centerpiece at a formal dinner. Lena maneuvered her chair into position, and Ethan was struck by how practiced her movements were. The efficiency of someone who'd learned to navigate a world that hadn't been built with her in mind. "So," Mia said, settling back into her seat and picking up her purple crayon like they were old friends catching up. "What do you do? Like for work and stuff?" "Mia," Ethan warned gently. "Maybe let Lena settle in before the interrogation." "It's okay." Lena's voice still carried caution, but there was something looser in it now, less defensive. "I work data entry for a logistics company. It's remote, mostly, pays the bills." "That sounds boring," Mia said with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Mia!" "No, she's right." Lena actually smiled, small but real. "It is boring, but boring pays for things like birthday cupcakes, so I'm not complaining." Mrs. Delaney appeared then, carrying a tray with 3 mugs of hot chocolate topped with small mountains of whipped cream and 2 plates of cookies. "Thought you might need extras," she said, setting everything down with a warm smile directed at all of them. "On the house for the birthday girl." Lena's eyes went wide. "Mrs. D, you don't have to—" "Hush, it's your birthday, and I'm old enough to do whatever I want. Enjoy." She patted Lena's shoulder once, gently, and headed back to the counter before any of them could protest further. Mia immediately grabbed one of the cookies and pushed the plate toward Lena. "These are the chocolate chip ones, and they're really good. You should definitely have one." "Thank you." Lena took a cookie, and Ethan noticed her hands, thin but steady, with short, practical nails. Working hands. Hands that had learned to do things for themselves because there was nobody else to do them. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment, the awkwardness gradually dissolving into something easier. Outside, the afternoon light continued its slow fade toward evening, painting the wet street in shades of amber and gray. "So," Ethan said, cradling his hot chocolate between his palms. "Data entry. How'd you get into that?" Lena shrugged, a careful gesture. "Applied to about 50 remote positions after I aged out of foster care. That was the one that said yes." The words landed with deliberate casualness, but Ethan heard everything underneath them. Foster care, which meant no family, no support system, no safety net, which explained the worn clothes, the careful counting of change, the way she moved through the world like she was used to being invisible. "That must have been hard," he said, keeping his voice neutral, not pitying. It was what it was. Lena took a sip of her hot chocolate, and something in her expression softened. "This is really good." "The hot chocolate here is legendary," Mia announced. "We come every Saturday. It's our tradition." "Right, Dad?" "Right, kiddo." "We used to come with Mom," Mia continued, her voice matter-of-fact in the way kids could be about devastating truths. "But now it's just me and Dad. But it's still good. Different, but good." Lena looked at Ethan, really looked at him, and he saw recognition in her eyes. They were both members of the same club, the people who'd learned to build lives around the empty spaces where other people should have been. "How long ago?" she asked quietly. 2 years. Cancer. It was fast at the end." "I'm sorry." "Thank you." Ethan meant it. There was something in the way Lena said it, no platitudes, no false cheer, just acknowledgement, that felt more honest than most condolences he'd received. "My mom died when I was really little," Mia said, pushing marshmallows around in her mug with a spoon. "I don't remember her super well. Just pieces. Like how she smelled like vanilla and how she used to sing really loud in the car even though she couldn't really sing." "Those sound like good pieces to remember," Lena said. "Yeah, Dad fills in the rest. He tells me stories about her so I know who she was." "That's a good dad then." Mia nodded seriously. "He's the best. He makes terrible pancakes, but otherwise he's pretty great." Ethan laughed despite himself. "Thanks for the glowing review, kid." "You're welcome." Mia turned back to Lena with renewed focus. "So you aged out of foster care? What does that mean?" Mia, that's probably personal. It's okay, Lena interrupted, and there was something in her voice that suggested she didn't get asked direct questions very often, that most people preferred to guess and assume rather than actually talk to her. It means when you turn 18 in the foster system, you're basically on your own. No more state support, no more placements. You're an adult, so you have to figure it out yourself. But you were just 18, Mia said, her small face serious. That's not very old to be all alone. No, Lena agreed. It's not. Did you have any brothers or sisters? A few foster siblings over the years, but nobody permanent. Nobody who stuck. Mia considered this, her purple crayon forgotten in her hand. That's really sad. Sometimes. Lena's voice was careful, measured. But you get used to it. You learn to take care of yourself. You shouldn't have to get used to it, though. Mia's certainty was back, that unshakable moral compass that didn't know how to compromise. People aren't supposed to be alone. That's not how it works. We're supposed to have people. Ethan felt his chest tighten. This was Sarah talking. These were her words, her beliefs, coming out of their daughter's mouth. We're supposed to have people. How many times had Sarah said exactly that? How many times had she insisted that connection wasn't optional, that humans were built for each other, that isolation was its own kind of death? Your mom was really wise, Lena said softly. She was. Mia picked up her crayon again, but her attention stayed on Lena. She used to say that family isn't always blood, that sometimes family is the people who choose you and you choose them back. That's real family. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Ethan watched Lena's face, saw something crack open there, something raw and painful and desperately hopeful all at once. I like that definition, Lena managed, her voice rough around the edges. Me too. Mia pushed her drawing across the table. Okay, so this is my dragon, but I'm having trouble with the wings. Do you think they should be more bat-like or more bird-like? And just like that, the intensity broke. There were three people at a cafe table looking at a child's drawing, arguing good-naturedly about wing structures and scale patterns. The conversation flowed easier now, moving from dragons to favorite colors to whether cookies should have chocolate chips or M&Ms, a debate that got surprisingly heated. Lena relaxed incrementally, her shoulders losing their defensive hunch, her responses becoming less guarded. She had a dry sense of humor, Ethan discovered, sharp and a little unexpected, showing up in small flashes that made Mia giggle and Ethan smile despite himself. The cafe around them continued its afternoon rhythm. Mrs. Delaney bustled behind the counter, the espresso machine hissed and gurgled, conversations rose and fell like small waves. Normal. Ordinary. The kind of moment that wouldn't register as significant to most people. But Ethan knew better. After Sarah died, he'd learned to recognize these moments. The small kindnesses that held entire worlds inside them. The tiny decisions that could change everything. This was one of those moments. He could feel it in the way Lena's eyes had stopped scanning for exits, in the way Mia had unconsciously scooted her chair closer, in the way the winter afternoon light seemed to hold them all in a warm, temporary cocoon. You still haven't lit your candle? Mia observed, pointing to the cupcake that sat forgotten in the center of the table. Lena looked at it and something sad moved across her face. I wasn't sure I was going to. Why not? I don't know. It felt silly, making a wish when there's nobody around to see it happen. We're around, Mia said simply. We'll see it, and wishes are important. You have to make them, or they can't come true. That's the rule. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out his lighter. He'd kept carrying it even though he quit smoking years ago, one of those habits that persisted for no good reason. Mia's right. Birthday wishes are serious business, non-negotiable. Lena looked between them, and Ethan saw her wavering on some internal edge. Then slowly, she nodded. He lit the candle. The small flame caught and held, bright against the fading afternoon light. It cast moving shadows across Lena's face, making her look younger and older at the same time. Make a wish, Mia whispered, leaning forward with the intensity of someone witnessing a sacred ritual. Lena closed her eyes. Her lips moved silently, forming words nobody else could hear. When she opened them again, there were tears clinging to her lashes, but she was smiling, a real smile this time, not the careful, defensive version she'd been wearing like armor. She blew out the candle. Mia cheered, and Ethan found himself clapping, and the businessman at the counter looked up and smiled despite himself, and Mrs. Delaney called out, "Happy birthday!" from behind the espresso machine. For just a moment, the cafe felt like exactly what it was supposed to be. A place where strangers could become something more, where loneliness could be interrupted by deliberate kindness, where a $3 cupcake could mean everything. Lena wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, embarrassed. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," Ethan said firmly. "You're allowed to have feelings on your birthday. Hell, you're allowed to have feelings any day." "I'm just not used to—" She trailed off, searching for words. "This. Any of this." "Well, get used to it," Mia announced, breaking off a piece of the cupcake and handing it to Lena. "Because you're part of our Saturday now. Right, Dad?" Ethan felt the weight of that question, the invitation it represented, the door it was opening. He thought about Sarah, about what she would say. He thought about the last 2 years of grief and isolation, about the way he and Mia had been circling each other in their quiet house, both trying to be okay for the other person's sake. He thought about how it felt to finally look outside that small, careful circle they'd built. "Right," he heard himself say. "If you want to be, you're absolutely part of our Saturday." Lena stared at him, then at Mia, then back at him. "You don't even know me." "Not yet," Ethan agreed, "but we'd like to, if that's okay with you." The silence stretched out, delicate and impossible. Ethan could see Lena struggling with herself, could see all the reasons she'd learned to say no, warring with the desperate, dangerous hope that maybe, just maybe, she could say yes. "Okay," she whispered finally. "Okay, I'd like that." Mia's whoop of victory was loud enough to turn heads throughout the cafe, but neither Ethan nor Lena seemed to notice. They were too busy trying to figure out what had just happened, how a simple act of birthday kindness had turned into something that felt suspiciously like the beginning of everything. Outside, the February afternoon continued its slow fade toward evening. Inside the Riverside Cafe, 3 people sat at a window table, sharing hot chocolate and cookies and a $3 cupcake, building something neither of them had words for yet, but both recognized as necessary, as vital, as the kind of thing that made cold winters bearable. Somewhere above them, beyond the cafe's warm lights and the street's gray sky, the world kept turning. But here, in this small pocket of Cincinnati, time felt different, slower, more generous. Like maybe there was space for new beginnings, for unexpected families, for the kind of connections that snuck up on you when you weren't paying attention. Like maybe loneliness wasn't actually a permanent condition. Like maybe being chosen was something that could still happen, even when you'd stopped believing in it. Like maybe, just maybe, everything was about to change. The following Saturday arrived with the kind of cold that made Cincinnati feel like it was holding its breath. Ethan woke early, the way he always did these days. Some internal alarm clock that refused to acknowledge weekends, or the basic human need for rest. He lay in bed for a moment, listening to the quiet house, feeling the familiar weight of another day settling over him like a blanket he couldn't quite kick off. Then he remembered. Lena. They'd exchanged numbers before leaving the cafe last week, a hesitant transaction that felt loaded with more significance than it should have. Ethan had texted once midweek, just a simple, "Hope you're having a good week," and Lena had responded hours later with, "You too, thanks again for last Saturday." Polite, careful, the kind of message that gave away nothing while somehow revealing everything about how unused she was to casual friendship. Mia, predictably, had talked about nothing else all week. "When are we seeing Lena again? Can we invite her to the Science Museum? Do you think she likes pizza? What if she doesn't want to come back? What if she was just being nice?" Ethan had fielded each question with patient redirection, but privately he'd wondered the same things. Would Lena show up? Had their invitation been too much, too fast? Had they accidentally pushed into space she wasn't ready to share? He rolled out of bed and padded downstairs, started the coffee maker, stood at the kitchen window watching the gray dawn break over their quiet street. The house felt different lately, less like a mausoleum, more like a place where people actually lived. He wasn't sure if that was because of last Saturday or because something in him had finally, carefully started to thaw. "Dad?" Mia's voice came from the doorway, sleep rough and small. She was wearing her favorite pajamas, the ones with dinosaurs that were getting too small but that she refused to give up. "Is it Saturday?" "It's Saturday, kiddo." "Are we still going to the cafe?" "That's the plan." "What if Lena doesn't come?" Ethan turned to look at his daughter, at the worry creasing her small forehead. "Then we'll have hot chocolate and cookies, just like always. And it'll still be a good Saturday." "But it would be better if she came." "Yeah," Ethan admitted. "It would be better if she came." They arrived at Riverside Cafe at 2:30, their usual time. The place was moderately busy, weekend afternoon crowd, families and couples, and college students with laptops. Mrs. Delaney waved from behind the counter, her smile warm and knowing. Ethan and Mia claimed their regular table by the window. Mia unpacked her crayons with unusual solemnity, arranging them in careful rows like a surgeon laying out instruments. Her eyes kept flicking to the door, anxious and hopeful in equal measure. 2:45 came and went. 3 o'clock arrived with no sign of Lena. "Maybe she forgot," Mia said quietly, not looking up from her coloring. "Maybe she got busy," Ethan offered, though his own chest had tightened with something that felt uncomfortably like disappointment. "Or maybe Saturday afternoons don't work for her schedule. Or maybe she decided she doesn't actually want to hang out with us." "Mia." The cafe door opened, letting in a blast of cold air and the sound of struggle that Ethan was learning to recognize. He looked up. Lena was maneuvering through the doorway, her wheelchair catching briefly on the threshold before she pushed through. She wore the same gray sweater as last week, but she'd added a scarf, blue, hand-knitted, with a few drop stitches visible even from across the room. Her face was flushed from the cold, her dark eyes scanning the cafe with visible nervousness. Those eyes found their table. Found them. And something in her expression loosened, relaxed, like she'd been holding herself together until she could confirm they were actually here, that she hadn't imagined the invitation entirely. Mia practically launched herself out of her chair. "Lena, you came!" "I said I would," Lena replied, navigating between tables with practiced efficiency. But Ethan caught the slight tremor in her voice, the relief underneath the words. She'd been nervous too. She'd been afraid they wouldn't be here. "We saved you a spot," Mia announced, gesturing to the space they'd deliberately left open. "And I brought extra crayons just in case. Do you like purple? Because I have like 4 different purples." "Purple's good." Lena positioned her chair at the table, and this time Ethan noticed details he'd missed last week. The way the chair's armrest was held together with duct tape, the way one wheel squeaked slightly when it turned, the way Lena's movement suggested she'd been navigating this particular piece of equipment for a long time. Mrs. Delaney appeared almost immediately, carrying a tray. "The usual for you two," she said, setting down hot chocolate and cookies. "And for you, dear?" She directed this to Lena with gentle expectation. "Just water is fine, thanks." "Water and hot chocolate," Mrs. Delaney corrected firmly. "And cookies. It's Saturday, after all." Lena started to protest, but Mrs. Delaney had already bustled away, leaving no room for argument. Ethan saw the conflict play across Lena's face, gratitude mixed with discomfort, the struggle of someone unused to accepting things freely given. "She does that," he said quietly. "Mrs. D has a policy about Saturdays, no arguments allowed." I don't want to take advantage." "You're not. She offers because she wants to. Learning to accept kindness isn't the same as taking advantage." Lena looked at him sharply, and Ethan realized he'd hit something tender. "Sorry, that came out more lectury than I meant." "No, you're, Lena paused, choosing words carefully. "You're probably right. I'm just not great at the accepting part." "I'm not either," Ethan admitted. "After Sarah died, everyone wanted to help. Bring meals, watch Mia, fix things around the house, and I kept saying no because it felt like admitting I couldn't handle it myself. Took me a long time to realize that letting people help wasn't weakness. It was just being human." Mia, who'd been listening with 7-year-old intensity, nodded seriously. "Dad's really stubborn, but he's getting better." "Thanks, kid." "You're welcome." Mia pushed a purple crayon across the table toward Lena. So I've been working on this dragon all week, and I think I figured out the wings, but now I need help with the treasure hoard. What do you think dragons keep in their treasure? Just gold? Or other stuff too? And just like that, they slipped into conversation. Easy, natural, like this was something they'd been doing for years instead of just one previous Saturday. Lena's initial nervousness faded incrementally, her responses becoming less guarded, her rare smiles appearing more frequently. Mrs. Delaney returned with hot chocolate and an extra plate of cookies, setting them down with a satisfied nod. Lena accepted them with a quiet, "Thank you," that sounded like it cost something to say, like gratitude was a muscle she hadn't exercised in a long time. They talked about small things, Mia's school week, a funny thing that happened at Ethan's work. He was a civil engineer for the city, designing water systems, a job that sounded more boring than it was. The book Lena was reading, safe topics, gentle explorations of each other's lives. But then Mia, with the fearless directness of childhood, asked the question Ethan had been carefully avoiding. "How come you're in a wheelchair?" Ethan's hand tightened on his mug. "Mia, it's okay." Lena's voice was measured, but not angry. She looked at Mia with something like appreciation. "Most adults spend so much energy pretending not to notice. It's actually kind of refreshing when someone just asks." "So what happened?" Mia leaned forward, genuinely curious rather than morbidly fascinated. Lena was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her hot chocolate mug. "I was 18, just aged out of foster care, living in a group home while I saved up for my own place. There was this climbing wall at the rec center, free on Wednesdays. I used to go every week, loved it. Felt like flying, you know?" Mia nodded, entranced. "One day I was climbing, and I got to this really tricky section. I should have asked for help, should have used better equipment, but I was—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "I was trying to prove something, to myself, I guess, that I could do hard things alone, that I didn't need anyone." "What happened?" Mia's voice was barely a whisper. "I fell, about 30 feet, landed wrong, broke my back." Lena said it matter-of-factly, like she was reciting someone else's story. "Spinal cord injury, T12 level, if you want the technical details. Spent 6 months in rehab learning how to do everything differently. And then I was back on my own, except now I was on my own with a wheelchair and medical bills and a world that suddenly seemed a lot less interested in making space for me." The silence that followed was heavy with things none of them knew how to say. Ethan felt his chest tighten with recognition, not of the specific experience, but of the underlying truth. That moment when life splits into before and after. That realization that you have to build an entirely new normal from scratch. "That's really unfair," Mia said finally, her small face serious. "Yeah," Lena agreed. "It really is." "Were you scared?" "Terrified. Still am, sometimes." Lena's honesty was startling, undefended. "Being disabled and alone it's complicated. There are days when getting dressed feels like climbing a mountain. Days when I can't get my chair through a door and I just want to scream. Days when I'm so tired of fighting for basic access that I just stay home because it's easier." "But you came here today," Mia observed, "even though it's hard." "Yeah, I did." Lena's eyes found Ethan's, and there was something vulnerable in them, something that made his breath catch. "Because sometimes the hard thing is worth it." Ethan felt that sentence settle in his chest, felt it resonating with truths he'd been avoiding. How many times had he chosen the easier path lately? How many invitations had he turned down? How many connections had he avoided because staying in his careful, controlled grief was less terrifying than risking new pain? "I'm glad you came," he said quietly. "Me too," Mia added. "And I think you're really brave. Braver than my dragon, even." Lena laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. "That's high praise. Your dragon looks pretty fierce." "She is, but you're fiercer." The afternoon stretched on, the light outside shifting from gray to amber as evening approached. They talked more, about Mia's school, about Ethan's work, about the logistics company where Lena spent her days entering data and wondering if this was all her life was going to be. Small revelations, careful trust building, the tentative construction of something that might become friendship. At one point, Mia needed to use the restroom, and Ethan and Lena were left alone at the table. The silence between them was different now, less awkward, more companionable. "Thank you," Lena said suddenly, "for last week. For this. For not treating me like I'm made of glass or like I'm some kind of inspiration porn." Ethan frowned. Inspiration porn? It's what disabled people call it when able-bodied people treat us like we're automatically heroic just for existing. "Oh, you're so brave for leaving your house. You're such an inspiration for living your life," as if basic survival is somehow extraordinary just because we're disabled. She shook her head. "You and Mia don't do that. You just treat me like a person." "You are a person," Ethan said simply. "Why would we treat you any other way?" "You'd be surprised how rare that is." Ethan thought about that, about the way the cafe had gone silent when Lena entered, about the averted eyes, about the way people seemed to think disability was contagious or uncomfortable or something to be politely ignored. He thought about how exhausting it must be to navigate a world that refused to see you clearly. "For what it's worth," he said carefully, "I think you're brave. Not because you're in a wheelchair, but because you keep showing up even when the world makes it harder than it should be. That kind of courage, the everyday kind, that matters." Lena's throat worked. She looked away, out the window, but not before Ethan saw her eyes go bright with unshed tears. "Nobody's ever put it like that before." "Well, they should have." Mia returned then, chattering about the hand dryer in the bathroom and how it was really loud, and the moment passed. But something had shifted between them. Some barrier had come down. Some new understanding had been reached. When they finally left the cafe 2 hours later, the winter evening had settled in fully, the streetlights casting orange pools on the wet pavement. Ethan and Mia walked Lena to her car, an old sedan with hand controls and a wheelchair lift that looked like it had seen better days. "Same time next week?" Mia asked, bouncing on her toes despite the cold. Lena smiled. "Same time next week." "Promise?" "Promise." Mia threw her arms around Lena in an impulsive hug, and Ethan saw Lena freeze for just a second before her hands came up to return the embrace. Her eyes closed, and her expression did something complicated, joy and pain and desperate gratitude all mixed together. When Mia pulled back, Lena was wiping at her eyes. "Sorry, I'm not usually this weepy." "You're allowed to have feelings," Mia said, echoing her father's words from last week. "That's what Dad always tells me. Your dad's pretty smart." "I know." Mia grabbed Ethan's hand. "Come on, Dad. We should let Lena get home before it gets too late." They watched Lena load her wheelchair into the car, a complicated process involving careful maneuvering and practice movements. Then she was pulling away, her taillights disappearing into the Cincinnati evening, and Ethan and Mia were alone on the sidewalk. "I really like her," Mia said quietly. "Me too, kiddo. Do you think she'll keep coming back?" Ethan thought about the way Lena had looked when Mia hugged her, about the careful hope in her eyes when she'd promised to return. "Yeah," he said, "I think she will." The next Saturday, Lena arrived 15 minutes early. The Saturday after that, she brought a small sketchbook and showed Mia how to draw more realistic dragon wings. The Saturday after that, they stayed until Mrs. Delaney started cleaning up for closing, and even then they lingered in the parking lot, talking until the cold drove them to their separate cars. It became a routine, then a ritual, then something essential. Saturdays meant the three of them at the cafe, meant hot chocolate and conversation and the slow, careful building of trust. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's boundaries, each other's stories. Ethan learned that Lena loved science fiction novels and terrible reality TV in equal measure, that she'd taught herself to code in her spare time but didn't think she was good enough to apply for programming jobs, that she lived in a tiny studio apartment on the west side, barely accessible, with a landlord who ignored her requests for basic modifications, that she had no family, no emergency contact, nobody to call if things went wrong. Lena learned that Ethan had been an engineer before Sarah got sick, but had taken a less demanding city job after she died so he could be more present for Mia, that he still wore his wedding ring and probably always would, that he struggled with insomnia and guilt in equal measure, convinced he should have done more, should have saved her somehow, even though logically he knew cancer didn't work that way. Mia, for her part, appointed herself the official bridge between them, the the one who could ask the questions adults danced around, who could state obvious truths without fear, who could love with the uncomplicated certainty of someone who hadn't yet learned to protect herself. It was Mia who eventually asked the question that changed everything. They were on their 5th Saturday together, deep into March now, the winter finally starting to loosen its grip. Spring wasn't quite here yet, but it was close enough to feel possible. They'd exhausted their usual topics and fallen into comfortable silence, watching the street outside when Mia suddenly looked up from her coloring. "Lena, do you do anything besides work and come here on Saturdays?" Lena blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "Like fun stuff. Do you go places, see things, have adventures?" "Mia," Ethan warned. "What? I'm just asking." Mia turned back to Lena with genuine curiosity. "Do you?" Lena's expression had gone carefully neutral. "Not really. Most places aren't super accessible, and it's hard to do things alone when you need help with basic stuff." "That's sad," Mia announced with her characteristic bluntness. "You should do fun things. Everyone should do fun things." "Well, coming here is fun," Lena offered. "But we need to do other stuff too, like go to museums or movies or the park or something." Mia looked at her father expectantly. "Right, Dad?" Ethan felt the weight of that question, the invitation it represented, the line it was asking them to cross. Saturdays at the cafe were one thing. They were bounded, predictable, safe. But Mia was suggesting something more. Something that looked suspiciously like actual friendship, like integrating Lena into their lives in ways that would require vulnerability from all of them. He looked at Lena, saw the careful hope in her eyes warring with the expectation of rejection. She'd been let down before. He could see that in the way she held herself, in the defensive hunch of her shoulders. "Right," he heard himself say. "Mia's right. We should do other stuff." Lena's eyes went wide. "You don't have to." "We want to," Mia interrupted firmly. "We want you to be part of our adventures, not just our Saturdays." Lena struggled for words, her throat working. "I don't want to intrude on your time together. You guys are a family. You're our friend," Ethan said quietly. "And friends do things together. If you want to, that is. No pressure. But the invitation's genuine." Lena stared at them both, and Ethan watched her internal battle play out across her face. The want was there, clear and desperate. But so was the fear. The learned wariness of someone who'd been disappointed too many times to trust easily. "Okay," she whispered finally. "Okay, yes. I'd like that." Mia's cheer was loud enough to turn heads throughout the cafe, but none of them cared. They were too busy grinning at each other, too busy feeling the significance of this moment, the choice they'd all just made to stop keeping each other at arm's length, to risk the messy, complicated work of actually letting someone in. "So what should we do first?" Mia asked, practically vibrating with excitement. "The science museum, the aquarium, the zoo?" "It's still pretty cold for outdoor stuff," Ethan observed. "Maybe we start with something inside?" "The science museum has this new exhibit on space," Lena offered tentatively. "I read about it online. It's supposed to be really good." "Yes, space!" Mia bounced in her seat. "Can we go next Saturday, please?" Ethan laughed. "Sure, kiddo. Next Saturday, Science Museum. It's a date." The word hung in the air for a moment, date, and Ethan felt his face heat. "Not a date, just a plan, an outing." Lena's lips twitched. "I know what you meant. Good, great, cool." Ethan took a long drink of his hot chocolate to cover his embarrassment, and Mia giggled, and Lena's smile went soft and genuine. And outside the cafe window, Cincinnati continued its slow march toward spring. They made plans, actual specific plans, trading phone numbers and discussing logistics and accessibility. Lena pulled up the museum website on her phone to check their accessibility accommodations. Ethan made a note to call ahead and confirm parking. Mia declared she was going to wear her special space shirt that glowed in the dark. When they finally left the cafe that evening, something had fundamentally shifted. They weren't just 3 people who happened to share Saturday afternoons anymore. They were becoming something else. Something that looked like friendship, like chosen family, like the kind of connection that required deliberate nurturing and care. Ethan helped Lena load her wheelchair. a task she usually insisted on doing herself, but that she now accepted with a simple thanks. Mia gave her usual goodbye hug, but this time Lena was ready for it, her arms opening immediately to receive it. "See you next week," Lena said. "For space adventures," Mia added. "For space adventures," Lena agreed, and her smile was the kind that came from somewhere deep, somewhere that hadn't smiled in a very long time. Driving home, Mia chattered endlessly about next Saturday's plans, about what they'd see at the museum, about how Lena was going to love the planetarium. Ethan listened with half his attention, the other half occupied with the strange feeling blooming in his chest, something that felt suspiciously like hope, like possibility, like the slow thawing of something he'd thought was frozen permanently. He thought about Sarah, about what she would say if she could see him now. She'd be proud, he decided. Proud that he was letting someone in, that he was teaching Mia about connection and kindness, not just through words, but through action. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan sat in the quiet house and let himself feel everything he'd been holding at bay. The grief was still there. It would always be there, he'd learned, a permanent resident in his chest. But there was something else now, too. Something lighter. Something that felt like maybe life could be more than just surviving, more than just going through motions. His phone buzzed, a text from Lena. "Thank you for today, for all the Saturdays. I didn't know how much I needed this until I had it." Ethan stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. "Same here. See you Saturday." Outside, March continued its slow transformation into April. Inside, 3 people who'd started as strangers were learning what it meant to choose each other, to build something new from shared loneliness and deliberate kindness. And in a small cafe on the east side of Cincinnati, Mrs. Delaney hummed as she wiped down tables, smiling to herself about birthday cupcakes and the way small gestures could sometimes change everything. The Science Museum trip happened on a Saturday that felt more like spring than winter, the kind of day where Cincinnati seemed to remember that seasons were supposed to change. Ethan picked up Lena from her apartment, a cramped studio in a building that clearly predated any accessibility requirements, with a ramp that looked like it had been added as an afterthought and an elevator that wheezed ominously. When Lena rolled out to meet them, Mia immediately launched into excited chatter about everything they were going to see, barely pausing for breath. Lena's smile was genuine but tinged with nervousness, and Ethan recognized that expression, the anxiety of stepping outside established routines, of risking disappointment in unfamiliar territory. "Museum's supposed to be fully accessible," he said as they drove. I called ahead. "They've got ramps, elevators, accessible restrooms on every floor." "You didn't have to do that." Lena's voice was quiet. "I know. But I wanted to make sure we could all actually enjoy the day without worrying about logistics." Something in Lena's expression softened. "Thank you. Most people don't think about that stuff until it becomes a problem." "Well, we're thinking about it before," Ethan replied simply. The museum was magnificent, all soaring glass and modern architecture, with wide corridors and gentle ramps that made navigation easy. Mia dragged them immediately to the space exhibit, her enthusiasm infectious enough that even Lena's nervousness began to dissolve. They spent hours wandering through galleries, Mia providing running commentary on planets and stars and the possibility of alien life. Lena engaged with surprising depth, revealing a knowledge of astronomy that made Ethan raise his eyebrows. "What?" she said, catching his expression. "I like space. Sue me." "No judgment, just surprised." "People are always surprised when disabled people have interests beyond our disabilities," Lena said. But there was no heat in it, just observation, maybe a little teasing. "Fair point. I'll work on my assumptions." They ate lunch in the museum cafe, and it was there, surrounded by the noise of other families, the clatter of trays and conversations, that Mia asked the question that had clearly been building all morning. "Lena, do you have any friends, like besides us?" "Mia," Ethan's voice held warning. "What? I'm just asking." Lena was quiet for a moment, stirring her soup with deliberate focus. "Not really," she said finally. "I had some people in foster care, but we lost touch after I aged out. And it's hard to make friends when you work from home, and most places aren't accessible enough to just hang out casually." "That's lonely." Mia observed with her characteristic directness. Yeah, it is. Well, you have us now, so you're not lonely anymore, right? Lena's eyes went bright and she blinked rapidly, looking away. Right, she managed. I have you guys now. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He'd been thinking about loneliness a lot lately, about how he and Mia had been operating in their own isolated bubbles since Sarah died, convincing themselves they were fine when really they were just surviving. Meeting Lena had thrown that into sharp relief. They'd all been lonely, all been struggling alone, all been pretending they didn't need anyone else. We should do more stuff together, he heard himself say. Not just Saturdays, other days too, if you want. Lena looked at him sharply. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, but I want to. We both do. He glanced at Mia, who was nodding vigorously. You're not an obligation, Lena. You're our friend. Friends spend time together. I just don't want to impose on your life. You have work, and Mia's school, and room for friendship, Ethan interrupted gently. We have room for you, if you'll let us in. The silence that followed was heavy with significance. Other families continued their lunches around them, oblivious to the small revolution happening at their table. Finally, Lena nodded, swallowing hard. Okay, she whispered. Okay, yes, I'd like that. Mia whooped and immediately started planning. Tuesday dinners, weekend movie nights, trips to the library. Ethan watched his daughter orchestrate their new social calendar with the confidence of a general planning a campaign and felt something in him relax, expand, make space for this new reality they were building. After the museum, they didn't want the day to end. They drove to a nearby park, one with paved paths wide enough for Lena's wheelchair, and walked, or rather, Ethan and Mia walked while Lena rolled, through the late afternoon sunshine. Spring was definitely coming now. You could see it in the tiny green shoots pushing through the soil, in the way the light had gone softer and warmer. Can I ask you something? Ethan said when Mia had run ahead to examine some interesting rocks. About your fall. You said you were trying to prove you could do hard things alone. Lena was silent for so long he thought she might not answer. Then, it wasn't an accident. Ethan's breath caught. He stopped walking, and Lena stopped too, her hands still on her wheels. She wasn't looking at him, was staring straight ahead at the path, at Mia's small figure in the distance. I didn't jump, she continued, her voice carefully controlled. Not exactly, but I took risks I knew were dangerous. I climbed higher than I should have, used equipment I knew was questionable. Part of me knew what might happen. Part of me didn't care. Lena, I was 18 and completely alone for the first time in my life. No foster family, no caseworker, no safety net. Just me and this world that seemed impossibly big and impossibly hard. And I was so tired. Her voice cracked on the last word. I was so tired of fighting for everything, of being nobody's priority, of knowing that if I disappeared, no one would really notice or care. Ethan felt like his heart was breaking. He moved to stand in front of her wheelchair, crouching down so they were at eye level. I'm so sorry that was your reality. No 18-year-old should have to feel that alone. But I did feel that alone. And when I climbed that wall, there was this moment at the top where I thought about just letting go, making it look like an accident, but really just being done with all of it. She finally looked at him, and her eyes were devastated. Then I actually fell, and it wasn't peaceful or easy. It was terrifying and painful, and I broke my back and spent months in the hospital wishing I could take it back, wishing I'd just held on. I'm glad you're here, Ethan said fiercely. I'm so glad you survived, even though She gestured at her wheelchair. Especially because of everything you've survived. Your chair isn't a tragedy, Lena. It's proof that you're still fighting, still here, still worthy of a full life even when the world makes it harder than it should be. Tears spilled down Lena's cheeks. Nobody's ever said that before. Everyone acts like this. She gestured at herself, at the chair, at everything the fall had changed, like it's the worst thing that could have happened, like I'd be better off if I just died. Well, they're wrong, dead wrong. Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back, and took her hand. You being here matters. Not despite your disability, not because you're some kind of inspiration, but because you're a whole person who deserves connection and joy and a life that feels worth living. And if the world hasn't shown you that yet, then the world is doing it wrong. Lena sobbed once, then covered her mouth with her free hand, trying to hold it together. Ethan stayed crouched in front of her, holding her other hand, letting her cry without trying to fix it or make it stop. Mia came running back then, her arms full of interesting rocks, and stopped short when she saw Lena crying. Her small face went serious, and she dropped the rocks immediately and wrapped her arms around Lena from the side, fierce and protective. "It's okay," she said with absolute certainty. "We've got you. We're not going anywhere." Lena pulled Mia closer, and Ethan stood, putting a hand on Lena's shoulder, and they stayed like that in the middle of the park path. Three people who'd found each other by accident, choosing in this moment to be family in all the ways that mattered. When Lena finally pulled herself together, wiping at her eyes with embarrassment, Mia just squeezed her hand and said, "Crying is okay. Dad cries sometimes too. It just means you have feelings, and feelings are important." "Your mom taught you well," Lena said, her voice rough. "Dad teaches me now. But yeah, it was Mom's thing first." Mia picked up her rocks again, examining them with renewed interest. "She used to say that people who never cry are just people who haven't figured out how to be honest yet." "Smart woman," Lena said. "The smartest," Mia agreed. They walked and rolled until the sun started to set, until the spring afternoon turned into evening and the temperature dropped enough to remind them winter wasn't quite done yet. On the drive back to Lena's apartment, Mia fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the day's adventures. "Thank you," Lena said quietly, "for today, for listening, for not running away when I told you the truth about my fall." "Why would I run away?" "Because it's heavy. Because mental health stuff scares people. Because admitting I was suicidal makes me damaged goods in most people's eyes." Ethan pulled up in front of her building and put the car in park. "You're not damaged goods. You were a kid in an impossible situation who didn't have the support you needed. That's not a character flaw. That's a failure of the system that was supposed to protect you. I still made choices. You made choices with the resources and support you had available, which was basically none. And you're here now, still fighting, still trying to build a life. That takes more courage than most people will ever need to have." Lena looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "How are you this understanding?" "I'm not always, but I've learned some things about pain and survival, about how we all do what we have to do to make it through the hard parts." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Sarah's cancer, at the end she was in so much pain that she asked me to help her end it. Asked me to give her extra morphine, to just let her go." "Did you?" "No, but not because I thought she was wrong to ask. I didn't because I couldn't make that choice for her, couldn't take that on even though I understood why she wanted it. She died 2 days later, naturally, but those 2 days, knowing she was ready to go, knowing she was only holding on because I couldn't let her leave," his voice broke. "I think about it all the time, about how we ask people to keep suffering just so we don't have to feel the loss." "That's different than what I did," Lena said softly. "Maybe. But it's all pain, isn't it? It's all people trying to figure out how to survive when survival feels impossible. I'm not going to judge you for that. I'm just grateful you're still here, that I get to know you, that Mia gets to have you in her life." Lena wiped at her eyes again. "You guys are the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. Maybe ever." "Good. Because you're pretty great for us too." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind that only comes after honest conversation, after barriers come down. Then Lena said, "Same time next Saturday? The cafe? Actually, how about Tuesday? Dinner at our place. Nothing fancy, just pasta and whatever Mia demands we watch on TV, but it would be nice to have you there." "You're sure?" "Completely sure. 7 o'clock work for you?" 7 o'clock works perfectly." Ethan helped Lena get her wheelchair out and watched her navigate the terrible ramp into her building. When she reached the door, she turned back and he waved back, and something in his chest felt lighter than it had in 2 years. The following Tuesday, Lena arrived at their house precisely at 7, carrying a bottle of wine and visible nervousness. Mia met her at the door with a tour guide's enthusiasm, dragging her through every room and pointing out important features like the good spot for reading and the cabinet where they kept the good snacks. "Your house is really nice," Lena said when Mia finally released her. "It's home," Ethan replied from the kitchen, where he was attempting to keep the pasta from boiling over. "Nothing fancy, but it's ours. Make yourself comfortable." Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Mia kept up a running commentary on everything that had happened at school that week. Ethan told an embarrassing story about a meeting at work, and Lena gradually relaxed enough to share her own stories, small pieces of her life offered like gifts. After dinner, they settled in the living room for a movie. Mia insisted on a nature documentary about penguins, and they all ended up on the couch. Lena in her chair pulled close, Mia curled against her father. Ethan hyper-aware of how right this felt, how easy, how much like family. Halfway through the documentary, Mia fell asleep, her breathing going deep and even. Ethan carefully extracted himself and carried her up to bed, tucking her in with practiced movements. When he came back downstairs, Lena was still watching the screen, but her attention seemed elsewhere. "She's really special," Lena said when he sat back down. "She is. Gets that from her mom." "Gets it from both of you, I think." Lena turned to look at him. "You're a really good dad, Ethan. I hope you know that." "I'm trying. Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping it together, like I'm failing her by not being both parents at once." "You're not failing her. You're showing her how to survive grief with grace, how to keep living even when it hurts. That's not nothing." They talked quietly as the documentary played on, unnoticed now. They talked about Sarah, about the foster system, about loneliness and survival and the strange comfort of being understood. They talked about small things too, favorite books, terrible TV shows, whether Cincinnati chili was actually good or just nostalgia. The evening stretched late, and eventually Lena said she should probably go. Ethan walked her to the door, rolled beside her, and found himself reluctant to let the night end. "Same time next week?" he asked. "Are you sure? I don't want to monopolize all your time." "You're not monopolizing, you're participating. There's a difference." He paused, then added, "Besides, the house is better with people in it, more alive. You make it feel more alive." Lena's expression went soft. "You make me feel more alive too. Both of you. I didn't realize how much I'd just been existing until I met you guys and remembered what actual living feels like." "Then we'll keep doing it. Living, I mean. Together." "Together," Lena agreed. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt inevitable, like this was how things were always supposed to be. Tuesday dinners became a fixture, with Lena showing up like clockwork and Mia planning elaborate meal requests. Saturday cafe visits continued, their regular table by the window now feeling like sacred ground, the place where this all started. But they added more too. Trips to the library where Lena helped Mia pick out books about space and dragons, weekend breakfasts at a diner with good accessibility and better pancakes, lazy Sunday afternoons where they just hang out at Ethan's house, doing nothing in particular but doing it together. Ethan's family noticed the change. His sister Claire came by one afternoon and found Lena there, helping Mia with a school project at the kitchen table. The look on Claire's face was complicated. Surprise, curiosity, something that might have been concern. "So this is the friend you've been talking about," Claire said carefully. "This is Lena," Ethan confirmed. "Lena, this is my sister Claire." "Nice to meet you," Lena said, and Ethan could see her putting on her polite armor, preparing for judgment. But Claire, bless her, just smiled and said, "Any friend of Mia's is a friend of ours. You coming to Sunday dinner this week? Mom makes enough food to feed an army." Lena looked at Ethan with panic in her eyes, and he stepped in smoothly. "We haven't talked about that yet. Maybe we let Lena ease into the extended Cole family chaos?" "Fair enough. But the invitation stands. Mom would love to meet you." Claire grabbed her jacket and headed for the door, then paused. "It's good to see you guys doing stuff again, E. Really good. Mom and I were getting worried." After she left, Lena let out a breath. "Your family seems nice." "They are. They can also be a lot. No pressure on the dinner thing." "Actually," Lena hesitated, "I think I'd like to meet them, if that's okay. I've never really had extended family before. It might be nice to see what that's like." "You sure? My mom will absolutely interrogate you about your entire life story while simultaneously trying to feed you enough food to sustain a small village. That sounds kind of perfect, actually. So the following Sunday, Lena came to family dinner. Ethan's mother, a formidable woman in her 60s who believed that food was love and silence was suspicious, took one look at Lena and immediately adopted her. By the end of the night, she was pressing Tupperware containers of leftovers into Lena's hands and making her promise to come back. "Your mom is intense," Lena said on the drive home, sounding dazed. "That's one word for it. I liked her, though. I liked all of them. They just accepted me like it was no big deal." "Because it isn't a big deal. You're part of things now. That's just how it is." Lena was quiet for a moment, and when Ethan glanced over, he saw tears on her cheeks again. "I've never been part of things before. Not like this. Not where people just include me without me having to earn it or prove I'm worth the effort. You don't have to prove anything. You just have to show up. That's it. That's the only requirement." "I can do that," Lena whispered. "I can show up." And she did. Week after week, she showed up. She became a fixture in their lives, as natural as breathing, as essential as air. Mia started calling her Aunt Lena without anyone telling her to, and Lena's face would light up every time she heard it. Ethan's mother started including her in group texts about family events. Claire's kids started asking when Lena was coming over again. Spring fully arrived, and with it came a restlessness in Ethan he didn't quite know what to do with. He found himself thinking about Lena at odd moments, remembering the way she laughed at Mia's jokes, the fierce intelligence in her eyes when she talked about books, the quiet strength she carried like a shield. He told himself it was just friendship, just gratitude for the way she'd helped bring his household back to life. But late at night, alone in his bedroom, he had to admit the truth was more complicated than that. He was falling for her. Slowly, carefully, terrifyingly, he was falling for Lena Harper. And he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The realization that he was falling for Lena hit Ethan like a freight train one ordinary Tuesday evening in late April. They were in his kitchen, Lena chopping vegetables for dinner while Mia did homework at the table, the whole scene so domestic and comfortable it hurt. Lena said something that made Mia laugh, that bright, uninhibited sound that had become rare after Sarah died, and Ethan felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. He loved her, not just cared about her, not just valued their friendship. He was in love with Lena Harper. And the guilt that crashed over him in the wake of that realization was almost enough to knock him off his feet. Sarah had been gone for 2 years. 2 years that felt simultaneously like yesterday and like a lifetime ago. He still wore his wedding ring. He still kept her picture on his nightstand. He still sometimes reached for her in the middle of the night, that half-asleep moment before reality reasserted itself and reminded him she was gone. How could he be falling in love with someone else? How could he even think about moving forward when Sarah was still so present in his heart? "Dad, you okay?" Mia's voice cut through his spiral. "You look weird." "I'm fine, kiddo. Just thinking." "About what?" "About how lucky we are," he said, and it was true even if it wasn't the whole truth. "To have good people in our lives." Lena glanced up from her cutting board, and their eyes met across the kitchen. Something passed between them, recognition, maybe, or just understanding. Then she smiled and went back to her vegetables, and Ethan tried to convince himself he'd imagined the spark of something deeper in her gaze. That night, after Lena left and Mia was asleep, Ethan sat in his bedroom staring at Sarah's photograph. She looked so alive in the picture, laughing at something off camera, her eyes bright with joy, her whole face lit up with the kind of happiness that made everyone around her happier too. "I don't know what to do," he whispered to the photograph. "I don't know if this is okay, if you'd be okay with this." The picture, of course, didn't answer, but somewhere in his memory, he could hear Sarah's voice from one of their last coherent conversations, when the morphine wasn't quite enough yet to blur everything into confusion. She'd grabbed his hand with what little strength she had left and said, "Promise me you won't stay alone forever. Promise me you'll let yourself love again when you're ready." He'd promised, even though at the time he couldn't imagine ever being ready, couldn't imagine anyone else ever filling the Sarah-shaped hole in his heart. But maybe that was the wrong way to think about it. Maybe it wasn't about filling holes or replacing what was lost. Maybe it was about making room for something new alongside the old, about expanding rather than replacing. The problem was, he had no idea if Lena felt the same way. Their friendship was so important, so essential to all three of them, that the thought of risking it by admitting his feelings made his stomach churn. What if she didn't feel the same? What if she was horrified by the idea? What if he ruined everything they'd built by wanting more than she could give? "You're overthinking again," Claire said when he called her the next day, desperate for perspective. "I've seen the way she looks at you, E, the way you look at her. Everyone sees it except apparently you two. What if I'm wrong? What if I wreck our friendship? What if you're right and you miss out on something amazing because you're too scared to try?" Claire countered. "Sarah wouldn't want you to stop living because she's gone. She loved you too much for that." "I know, I don't know how to do this. How to be interested in someone new without feeling like I'm betraying her memory." "You're not betraying anything. You're honoring what she wanted for you. A full life, not half a life spent looking backwards." Claire's voice softened. "Talk to Lena. Be honest. You might be surprised by what you hear." But Ethan couldn't seem to find the right moment for honesty. Every Tuesday dinner, every Saturday cafe visit, every casual weekend afternoon, he told himself he'd say something. And every time he chickened out, too afraid of changing the delicate balance they'd achieved. Meanwhile, Lena was dealing with her own crisis. Her landlord had finally responded to her repeated requests for accessibility modifications by informing her that he was selling the building and she had 60 days to find a new place. 60 days to locate an affordable, accessible apartment in a city that had precious few of either. She told them over dinner on a Tuesday in early May, her voice carefully controlled but her hands shaking slightly as she pushed food around her plate. "That's illegal," Ethan said immediately. "He can't just kick you out without proper notice, and he definitely can't refuse reasonable accommodations." "He can do whatever he wants," Lena replied tiredly. "I don't have money for a lawyer, and even if I did, fighting him would take longer than 60 days. I just need to find somewhere else." "Have you looked yet?" "I've been looking for 3 weeks. Everything affordable isn't accessible, and everything accessible isn't affordable. It's the same problem I had when I first aged out." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Story of my life, right? Always one crisis away from complete disaster." Mia, who'd been listening with increasing distress, suddenly spoke up. "You should live with us." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan's brain short-circuited, trying to process what his 7-year-old had just proposed. Lena stared at Mia like she'd suggested flying to the moon. "Sweetie, that's—" Ethan started, not sure how to finish. "It makes sense," Mia insisted with her trademark certainty. "We have the guest room downstairs. The bathroom down there is already big. And Lena's here all the time anyway. Why should she pay rent somewhere else when she could just live here with us?" "Mia, honey, it's not that simple," Lena said gently. "Your dad and I are friends, but living together is different. That's a big decision." "Why is it different?" "We're already like family. You said so yourself. Family lives together and takes care of each other." Mia looked between them with the innocent logic of someone who hadn't yet learned all the complicated reasons adults made things harder than they needed to be. "Don't you want to live with us?" "It's not about wanting—" Lena's voice cracked. "I would love to live with you guys, but I can't just impose like that. I can't ask your dad to take on that responsibility." "You're not asking. I'm offering." Mia turned to Ethan. "Right, Dad? We can offer." Ethan felt like he was standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying and potentially wonderful. The practical part of his brain was already cataloging the logistics. The guest room would work. The downstairs bathroom could be modified relatively easily. They had space. They had time. The emotional part of his brain was screaming that this was too much, too fast, too complicated given his inconvenient feelings that he hadn't even acknowledged out loud yet. But when he looked at Lena, at the hope and fear warring in her expression, at the way she'd already braced herself for rejection, he knew what Sarah would say. Sarah would tell him to stop overthinking and just help someone who needed help. Sarah would tell him that family was the people who showed up for each other, regardless of biology or convenience or traditional definitions. "Mia's right," he heard himself say. "You should stay here, at least temporarily until you find something permanent, or longer, if you want. We have the space, You're already part of our daily life. It makes sense. Ethan, I can't. Yes, you can. We want you here. Right, Mia? Right. Mia was practically bouncing in her chair. Please, Lena? Please say yes? Lena looked between them, her throat working. I'd pay rent and help with groceries and utilities. I'm not looking for a free ride. We can work out the details, Ethan said. But seriously, Lena, you need a place. We have a place. Let us help. I don't want you to feel obligated. I don't feel obligated. I feel like this is the right thing to do. For all of us. He meant it. Despite his complicated feelings, despite the way his heart was hammering against his ribs, he meant it completely. Please, let us do this. Lena's eyes filled with tears. You guys keep saving me, she whispered. I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I'm so grateful. You don't have to deserve kindness, Ethan said quietly. You just have to accept it. Okay, Lena managed. Okay, yes. Thank you. I'll stay here. At least for a while. Mia's cheer was loud enough to rattle the windows, and she launched herself at Lena for a fierce hug. Ethan watched them, his heart doing complicated things, and wondered what exactly he'd just agreed to. Living with the woman he was falling in love with, pretending everything was just friendly and casual, watching her be part of his daily life in ways that would make it impossible to maintain any emotional distance whatsoever. This was either the best decision he'd ever made or the worst. He'd find out soon enough. The move happened quickly. Ethan spent a weekend making accessibility modifications to the downstairs bathroom, grab bars, a roll-in shower, a sink with knee clearance underneath. His brother-in-law helped widen the doorway to the guest room by a few inches, and they rearranged furniture to create clear pathways throughout the first floor. Lena didn't have much to move, just a couple boxes of clothes, her computer set up, some books. Her entire life fit into the back of Ethan's truck with room to spare, and that fact made his chest ache. 25 years old, and everything she owned could be packed up in an afternoon. This is the nicest place I've ever lived, Lena said that first evening, looking around the guest room that was now hers. I know you probably think it's just a regular room, but for me, this is like a palace. It's your room now, Ethan replied. Make it feel like home however you want. Paint it, decorate it, whatever you need. I wouldn't even know where to start. I've never had a space that felt permanent enough to bother decorating. Well, this one's permanent, or at least as permanent as you want it to be. No rush to leave, no pressure. This is home now, if you want it to be. Lena's eyes went bright again. She'd been tearing up a lot lately, overwhelmed by the enormity of what was happening. I want it to be, she whispered. I really, really want it to be. The first week of living together was an adjustment. They had to negotiate morning routines and bathroom schedules and the reality of sharing space in ways they hadn't before. But it was surprisingly easy. Lena was considerate and quiet, cleaning up after herself almost compulsively, always asking before using anything, constantly offering to help with chores or cooking or anything that needed doing. You can relax, you know, Ethan told her one evening after she'd spent an hour scrubbing the kitchen, despite his protests. You live here. You don't have to earn your keep every second. I'm just trying to pull my weight. You already do, just by being here, by being part of our lives. You don't have to prove your worth every day. Old habits, Lena said quietly. In foster care, you learn real quick that you're only as valuable as you are useful. If you're not contributing, you're taking up space that could go to someone else. This isn't foster care. This is your home. You belong here whether you're useful or not, though for the record, you are incredibly useful. Mia's homework has never been more organized, and I'm pretty sure our grocery shopping has become 30% more efficient since you started making lists. Lena laughed despite herself. I do like a good organizational system. I've noticed. You should see my work files now. They're color-coded and everything. My coworkers think I've had some kind of personality transplant. They settled into new rhythms. Lena worked during the day while Ethan was at the office and Mia was at school. Ethan would come home to find dinner started, Lena and Mia doing homework together at the kitchen table, the house full of life and warmth in ways it hadn't been since Sarah died. Ethan's mother was delighted by the arrangement. I'm so glad you're taking care of each other, she said when she came by for a visit. That girl needs family, and you two need someone to help fill out your household. It's perfect. Perfect was one word for it. Complicated was another. Because living with Lena meant being constantly aware of her. The way she hummed while cooking, the sound of her voice reading bedtime stories to Mia, the quiet competence with which she moved through the house, making it feel more like a home than it had in years. It meant falling more in love with her every day, watching her bloom in the security of having a stable place and people who cared about her, seeing her become more confident and more herself. And it meant maintaining the careful fiction that they were just friends, just housemates, just two people helping each other out with no deeper feelings involved. Mia naturally saw through the fiction immediately. "Dad, do you like Lena?" she asked one night while Ethan was tucking her in. Lena was downstairs watching TV, safely out of earshot. "Of course I like her. She's our friend." "No, I mean, do you like her? Like how Mom used to say you liked her before you got married?" Ethan's heart stuttered. "What makes you ask that?" "Because you look at her the same way you look at pictures of Mom, all soft and smiley, and you're always trying to make her laugh, and you fixed her bathroom real nice, like you wanted everything to be perfect for her. I just wanted her to be comfortable." "Dad," Mia gave him a look that was far too knowing for a 7-year-old. "It's okay if you like her. I like her too. I think Mom would like her." "You do?" "Yeah. Mom always said you were supposed to find someone who made you want to be better, someone who saw the best in you even when you couldn't see it yourself. That's Lena. She makes you smile again. She makes the sad go away a little bit." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "The sad doesn't go away, kiddo. Not completely. I still miss Mom every day." "Me too. But it's okay to be happy again, too. You can miss Mom and like Lena at the same time. They can both be in your heart." Mia patted his hand with surprising gentleness. "You should tell her how you feel, before you get too scared." "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just don't always listen." She snuggled into her pillow, then added, "I'd be okay with it, you know. If you and Lena wanted to be more than friends. Just so you know." Ethan kissed her forehead, emotion making it hard to speak. "I love you, kid." "Love you too, Dad. Now go tell Lena. I'm tired of watching you two pretend." But Ethan didn't tell Lena that night, or the next night, or the week after that, because every time he thought about saying something, fear froze the words in his throat. What if he was misreading everything? What if Lena was grateful for their friendship and housing arrangement but had no romantic interest in him whatsoever? What if his feelings were completely one-sided and telling her would make everything awkward and force her to leave and ruin the best thing that had happened to their family in 2 years? So he stayed silent and tried to be content with what they had. This strange, wonderful arrangement where they lived together and raised Mia together and existed in each other's space with an ease that felt profound, even if it couldn't be everything he wanted. Then came the night that changed everything. It was mid-June, almost exactly 4 months since that first Saturday at the cafe. Mia was at a sleepover at Claire's house, giving Ethan and Lena a rare evening alone. They'd made dinner together, fallen into easy conversation over wine, ended up on the couch watching a movie neither of them was really paying attention to. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said during a quiet moment in the film. "And you promise to be honest?" "Always." "Why did you really let me move in here?" She wasn't looking at him, was staring at the TV screen with apparent fascination. "Was it just about helping me out? Or was there more to it?" Ethan's heart started hammering. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've been so kind to me, you and Mia both. But lately I feel like there's something, I don't know, something unspoken, and I can't figure out if I'm imagining it or if it's real." This was it. The moment he'd been simultaneously dreading and hoping for. He could deflect, could pretend not to understand, could keep maintaining the safe fiction they'd built. Or he could be brave. He could be honest. "You're not imagining it," he heard himself say. Lena finally looked at him, her dark eyes uncertain. "I'm not?" "No. There's definitely something unspoken." He took a breath, committed to the leap. "I'm falling in love with you, Lena. Maybe already have fallen. I don't know when it started exactly. Maybe that first Saturday, maybe later. But somewhere along the way you became essential. Not just as Mia's friend or as my housemate, but as someone I can't imagine my life without." The silence that followed felt like it lasted for years. Lena stared at him, her expression unreadable, and Ethan's heart sank. He'd miscalculated. He'd ruined everything. She was going to let him down gently and then move out, and he'd destroyed the best friendship he'd had since Sarah died. Then Lena started crying. "Hey, no!" Ethan moved closer, instinctively wanting to comfort her. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. We can just forget." "I'm falling in love with you too," Lena interrupted, her voice thick with tears. "I have been for months, but I thought you were still so in love with Sarah, and I didn't want to disrespect her memory, and I was so scared that you'd be horrified if you knew how I felt." Ethan's brain struggled to process what he was hearing. "You... what?" "I love you," Lena said, wiping at her eyes. "I love you and Mia both. You've given me a family when I never thought I'd have one. You've shown me what home feels like. You see me as a whole person, not just a disability or a sob story, and somewhere in all of that, I fell completely in love with you." "Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you say anything?" They stared at each other for a moment, then both laughed, a little hysterical, a lot relieved. Ethan reached out slowly, giving Lena time to pull back, and cupped her face in his hands. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. "Please," Lena whispered. The kiss was gentle, careful, loaded with months of unspoken feeling. Lena's hands came up to grip his shirt, holding him close, and Ethan felt something in his chest crack open, not breaking, but expanding, making room for this new love alongside the old. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lena said, "What about Sarah? Are you okay with this?" "Sarah told me to find love again when I was ready, made me promise not to stay alone forever." Ethan stroked his thumb across Lena's cheek, marveling that he was allowed to touch her like this now. "I think she'd like you. I think she'd be happy that Mia has you, that I have you, that we found each other." "I'll never try to replace her," Lena said seriously. "She'll always be Mia's mom, always be part of your history." "I know. That's part of why this works. You're not trying to erase the past. You're just helping us build a future." He kissed her again, soft and sweet. "I love you. In case that wasn't clear." "It's getting clearer." Lena smiled, radiant despite the tears still on her cheeks. "I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes. We'll figure it out together, the scary parts and the good parts and everything in between." They spent the rest of the evening on the couch, talking and kissing and making plans. They'd take things slow for Mia's sake, make sure she was comfortable with the transition from friends to something more. They'd keep the separate bedrooms for now, maintain some boundaries while everyone adjusted. They'd just be together, openly and honestly, after months of pretending their feelings were simpler than they were. When Mia came home the next day and found them holding hands on the couch, her response was immediate and emphatic. "Finally, I've been waiting forever for you two to figure it out. You're okay with this?" Ethan asked carefully. "Are you kidding? This is the best thing ever." Mia launched herself at both of them, hugging them together. "Now Lena can really be part of our family, like officially." "She was already part of our family," Ethan pointed out. "Yeah, but now it's the good kind, the kind where everybody loves each other." Mia pulled back, suddenly serious. "You do love each other, right? This isn't just like a friend thing?" "We love each other," Lena confirmed, her voice gentle. "Is that okay with you?" "It's perfect. You're perfect. This whole thing is perfect." Mia grinned. "Can I tell Grandma? She's going to be so excited." And she was right. Ethan's mother's response to the news was predictable enthusiasm. His sister Claire's response was, "About damn time." And the rest of the family folded Lena even further into their circle with the easy acceptance of people who'd seen this coming from miles away. Summer unfolded with a new sweetness. Ethan and Lena navigated their transition from friends to partners with careful attention to Mia's needs and comfort. They were affectionate but not overwhelming, present but not excluding her, building something that felt natural and right for all three of them. Lena bloomed in ways that were beautiful to watch. The constant anxiety that had lived in her shoulders began to ease. She laughed more, worried less, started making plans for a future that felt secure enough to hope for. She enrolled in online coding courses, finally believing she might be good enough for something more than data entry. She started volunteering with a local organization that helped foster kids aging out of the system, using her own experience to guide others through that impossible transition. And through it all, their family knit itself tighter. Tuesday dinners and Saturday cafe visits continued, now with added hand-holding and casual kisses that made Mia giggle. The house felt alive again, full of love and laughter and the ordinary magic of people choosing each other every single day. On a warm evening in late July, they returned to Riverside Cafe for Lena's birthday, her 26th, exactly 5 months after that first $3 cupcake. Mrs. Delaney brought out a real cake this time, decorated and beautiful, and the whole cafe sang while Lena tried not to cry. "Make a wish," Mia insisted, just like that first time. Lena looked at Ethan, at Mia, at the family they'd built from loneliness and deliberate kindness. "I don't need to," she said softly. "Everything I wished for already came true." But she closed her eyes anyway, blew out the candles, and when she opened them again, the joy in her face was so bright it hurt to look at. They were building something real here, something that honored the past while embracing the future, something that proved family wasn't always blood, that love could find you in the unlikeliest places, that one small moment of kindness could change absolutely everything. The summer stretched into fall, and their unconventional family continued to grow roots that went deeper than any of them had imagined possible. Lena's coding courses led to a job offer from a tech startup downtown, better pay, actual career prospects, work that challenged her in ways data entry never had. She cried when she got the offer, overwhelmed by the realization that her life was expanding in directions she'd never dared to hope for. "You earned this," Ethan told her that evening, holding her while she processed the enormity of it. "This isn't charity or luck. You worked hard and you're good at what you do." "I just keep waiting for it all to disappear," Lena admitted. "For someone to realize they made a mistake letting me have any of this. The job, this house, you and Mia. Like I'm going to wake up and be back in that studio apartment eating $3 cupcakes alone. That's not going to happen. This is real. We're real. And you deserve every good thing that comes your way." But Lena's insecurity wasn't entirely unfounded. Change, even good change, brought its own complications. Her new job meant adjusting their carefully balanced household routines. The office wasn't fully accessible despite their promises, which meant Lena spent the first few weeks navigating physical barriers and unconscious ableism from coworkers who'd never worked with a disabled person before. She came home exhausted those first weeks, emotionally drained from constantly having to advocate for basic accommodations, from being the only wheelchair user in a sea of able-bodied people who didn't understand why she couldn't just make do with stairs or narrow doorways or bathrooms she couldn't access. "I'm so tired of teaching people how to be decent," she said one particularly rough evening, her voice brittle with frustration. "I shouldn't have to explain to a tech company in 2025 why accessibility matters. They act like I'm being difficult when I ask for the same access everyone else gets automatically." Ethan helped her file formal complaints with HR, researched disability rights law, made sure Lena knew she didn't have to fight these battles alone. Mia, in her own way, provided fierce support, making cards that said Lena is the smartest person ever, and leaving them around the house for her to find. "Your coworkers are being dumb," Mia announced one evening with absolute certainty. "You're way smarter than them, and they should just do what you ask because it's the right thing." "I wish it worked that way, kiddo," Lena said, but she was smiling. "Thanks for having my back, though." "Always. That's what family does." Gradually, things improved. Lena's competence became undeniable, her contributions to the team essential enough that management finally took her accessibility concerns seriously. They renovated the bathroom on her floor, widened doorways, created space for her to work comfortably. More importantly, her coworkers stopped treating her disability as something unusual and started treating her as just another member of the team. Meanwhile, Ethan was navigating his own transformation. Falling in love with Lena had cracked something open in him, some protective shell he'd built around his heart after Sarah died. He found himself more present with Mia, more engaged at work, more willing to feel things fully instead of maintaining careful emotional distance from everything. But it also meant dealing with grief in new ways. There were moments when he'd catch himself being happy, genuinely, unselfconsciously happy, and then feel a wave of guilt so intense it was physically painful. How could he be this happy when Sarah was dead? How could he build a new life when the old one had been torn away so brutally? You're allowed to move forward, his therapist, a woman named Dr. Chen, who he'd finally agreed to see at Claire's insistence, told him during one session. Moving forward isn't betraying Sarah, it's honoring what she wanted for you, which was a full life. I know that intellectually, but emotionally it feels like I'm leaving her behind. You're not leaving her behind. You're carrying her with you in a different way. Sarah will always be Mia's mother, always be part of your history, always have shaped who you are. But she doesn't have to be the only love of your life. Hearts don't work like that. They expand. They make room for new love without diminishing the old. What if Lena always feels like she's competing with a ghost? Have you asked her how she feels? He hadn't. That evening, after Mia was asleep, he brought it up with Lena in their usual spot on the couch. Her wheelchair pulled close, his hand holding hers, the comfortable intimacy they'd built over months of careful trust. Do you ever feel like you're competing with Sarah? He asked quietly. Like you're trying to fill shoes that can't be filled? Lena was quiet for a moment, considering. Sometimes, she admitted, not because you make me feel that way, you don't, but because I know she was your first love, your wife, Mia's mom. She'll always be those things, and sometimes I wonder if there's room for me in a heart that loved someone that much. There's room, Ethan said fiercely. There's so much room. What I feel for you isn't less because I loved Sarah. It's just different. You're not replacing her. You're adding something new, something essential, something I didn't know I needed until I found it. I don't want you to feel guilty for being happy with me. I'm working on that, learning to accept that I can love you and miss her at the same time, that those things can coexist without canceling each other out. Lena shifted closer, her free hand coming up to cup his face. She must have been an amazing person to have loved you so well that you're still learning how to live without her. She was. And I think she'd like you. I think she'd be glad it was you. I wish I could have known her, not to compete or compare, just to understand better where you came from, to know more about the person who shaped you into the man I fell in love with. That night, Ethan did something he hadn't done since Sarah died. He got out old photo albums and videos, sat with Lena for hours showing her pieces of his first marriage, his life before. He told stories about Sarah's terrible sense of direction, her insistence on dancing in the kitchen, the way she'd loved fiercely and demanded the same fierce love in return. Lena listened and laughed and cried, and never once looked threatened or jealous. She just honored Sarah's memory by letting Ethan share it, by making space for the past while building their future. Thank you, he said when they'd finally put the albums away, when it was late and they were both emotionally exhausted, for not making me choose between loving her and loving you. You don't have to choose. Love isn't a limited resource. It's infinite if you let it be. Lena kissed him softly. I love you. And I loved hearing about her. She sounds like she was exactly the kind of person the world needed more of. She was, and so are you. Winter arrived, bringing with it the anniversary of Sarah's death. Ethan had been dreading it for weeks, unsure how to navigate this first major grief milestone with Lena in his life. But when the day came, Lena didn't try to distract him from it or make it easier. She just asked what he needed, what would honor Sarah best. They took flowers to Sarah's grave, all three of them together, a strange little family paying respects to the woman who'd made parts of their current family possible. Mia told her mom about school, about Lena, about how Dad smiled more now but still missed her every day. Ethan stood silent, holding Lena's hand on one side and Mia's on the other, feeling the weight of love and loss in equal measure. I hope you're okay with this, he said quietly to Sarah's headstone. I hope wherever you are, you can see that we're going to be okay, that Mia's going to be okay, that I found someone who loves her almost as much as you did. Lena squeezed his hand and Mia leaned against his leg, and for the first time since Sarah died, Ethan felt something like peace. As winter deepened, Lena continued her volunteer work with foster youth aging out of the system. She'd become a fierce advocate, using her own story to push for better support systems, more resources, actual preparation for the impossibly difficult transition from care to independence. She spoke at city council meetings, organized fundraisers, mentored individual kids who were facing the same terrifying threshold she'd crossed at 18. You're changing lives, Ethan told her after watching her speak at a particularly moving event. Those kids, They see you, and they see that it's possible to survive, to build something good even when the system fails you. I just wish I could do more. There are so many kids who age out every year with nothing, no family, no support, no preparation. We send them into the world and act surprised when they struggle. You can't save everyone, but you're saving some. That matters. The work was hard and often heartbreaking, but it gave Lena a sense of purpose she'd never had before. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving, using her pain to create meaning, transforming her own trauma into a ladder other people could climb. One of her mentees was a young man named Marcus, who reminded her so much of her 18-year-old self it hurt. Proud, scared, determined not to need anyone, aging out with nowhere to go and no one to call. Lena worked with him for months, helping him navigate housing applications and job searches, being the steady presence she'd never had. When Marcus got accepted to community college with a scholarship and stable housing, he cried in Lena's office, and she cried with him because she knew exactly what that acceptance meant. It meant someone believed he was worth investing in. It meant his life could be more than just survival. "You did this," she told him. "You put in the work. You didn't give up even when it was impossibly hard." "You helped," Marcus replied. "You showed me it was possible, that someone like us could actually make it." Later, telling Ethan about it, Lena said, "That's what I needed at 18, just one person who believed I could make it, who saw potential instead of a burden. If I can be that person for even a handful of kids, then maybe everything I went through mattered. Everything you went through mattered, because you survived it," Ethan said gently. "You don't have to earn the right to your own life by saving others, but I'm proud of you for trying anyway." Spring came again, marking a full year since Lena had moved in, since they'd admitted their feelings, since their strange little family had solidified into something permanent and precious. They celebrated with a party. Nothing fancy, just Ethan's extended family and a few friends, everyone crammed into their house eating too much food and laughing too loud. Mrs. Delaney came, bringing cupcakes from the cafe, and made a toast about how sometimes the smallest acts of kindness ripple out in ways we can't predict. Ethan's mother embarrassed him with stories about how worried she'd been before Lena came into their lives. Claire's kids treated Lena like she'd always been their aunt, climbing on her wheelchair and demanding her attention with the easy entitlement of children who'd never been taught to be careful around disability. Later, after everyone had left and Mia was asleep upstairs, Ethan and Lena sat in their quiet living room, surveying the aftermath of celebration. "I keep thinking about that first Saturday," Lena said softly. "How close I came to saying no when Mia invited me to your table. How easy it would have been to just eat my cupcake alone and leave and never know any of this was possible." "What made you say yes?" "Honestly, Mia's complete certainty that I shouldn't be alone. She didn't ask if I wanted company. She just stated it as fact. Nobody should be alone on their birthday, like it was a law of the universe." Lena smiled, remembering. "And I was so tired of being alone, so tired of pretending I was fine with it. So when this 7-year-old kid looked at me and just decided I was worth including, I couldn't say no." "I'm so glad you said yes." "Me too. Every single day, me too." Ethan shifted closer, taking both of Lena's hands in his. "I have something I want to ask you, and you can absolutely say no or say you need time or say it's too soon. But I need to ask anyway because I'm sure and I don't want to wait just because some arbitrary timeline says I should." Lena's eyes went wide. "Ethan, marry me." He said it simply, without preamble or elaborate proposal. "Marry me and be Mia's mom officially, and let me spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to be alone again. I know it's only been a year and a half since we met, less than a year since we admitted we loved each other. I know people will say it's too fast, that we should wait, but I don't want to wait. I want to build a life with you officially, permanently, with all the legal protections and social recognition that comes with marriage. I want everyone to know you're my family, that you chose us and we chose you." Lena was crying, her hands trembling in his. "Are you sure? Really sure? Because I come with complications. Disability isn't going away. There will be medical issues and accessibility challenges, and I know. And I'm choosing all of it. I'm choosing you exactly as you are, with every complication and challenge and beautiful, difficult piece of you." He pulled out a ring, simple, elegant, chosen with care over the past few weeks. I love you. Mia loves you. We want you to be ours officially. So please, Lena Harper, will you marry me? Yes. She was sobbing now, nodding frantically. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. I love you so much. I want to be your wife. I want to be Mia's mom. I want all of it. Ethan slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her close, kissing her with all the love and certainty he felt. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Lena said, "Should we tell Mia now or wait until morning?" "Are you kidding? She'd never forgive us if we waited." Ethan grinned. "Besides, she's probably been expecting this for months. Kid's scary perceptive." They woke Mia up gently, and her response to the news was immediate and enthusiastic. "Finally! I've been waiting for you to propose forever. Can I be the flower girl? Can Lena officially adopt me? Can we tell Grandma right now, even though it's late?" "Yes, yes, and absolutely not. Grandma needs her sleep," Ethan replied, laughing at his daughter's excitement. "So Lena's going to be my mom? Like really officially my mom?" "If that's okay with you," Lena said carefully, "your dad and I will get married, and I'd like to adopt you if you're comfortable with that. But Sarah will always be your mom too. I'm not trying to replace her." "I know. You're adding to the family, not replacing anyone." Mia threw her arms around Lena. "I want you to adopt me. I want you to be my mom officially. Is that okay?" "More than okay. I'd be honored." The wedding happened in early fall, simple and perfect in the way that mattered most to them. They got married in Riverside Cafe, Mrs. Delaney crying openly as she watched the ceremony unfold in her small establishment. Mia was indeed the flower girl, taking her role with extreme seriousness. Ethan's family filled the space with love and noise and the kind of joy that comes from watching people find happiness after grief. At the reception, Mrs. Delaney brought out a special cake, decorated to look like that original $3 cupcake, but supersized and surrounded by elaborate frosting flowers. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. What had started with Lena counting out exact change for one small birthday cupcake had transformed into this: a feast, a family, a celebration of everything they'd built from loneliness and deliberate kindness. "Speech," someone called out, and Ethan found himself standing with his new wife, his daughter pressed against his side, facing the people who'd supported them through this unlikely journey. "I don't have anything fancy prepared," he admitted. "But I want to say this. 2 years ago, I thought my capacity for love had died with Sarah. I thought the best I could hope for was surviving, going through motions, making sure Mia had at least one functional parent. Then this person," he gestured to Lena, "showed up counting out change for a birthday cupcake, and my daughter refused to let her celebrate alone. And suddenly, we weren't just surviving anymore. We were living. We were building something new without erasing what came before. Lena taught us that family isn't always blood, that love isn't a limited resource, that second chances are real if you're brave enough to take them." He paused, emotion making his voice rough. "So thank you. Thank you for saying yes that first Saturday. Thank you for moving in when you needed a place. Thank you for loving my daughter like she's yours. Thank you for showing me that my heart was bigger than I thought, that it had room for new love alongside the old. Thank you for being exactly who you are." Lena was crying again, happy tears this time, and pulled him down for a kiss that had the whole cafe cheering. When they broke apart, she took the microphone with trembling hands. "I aged out of foster care 8 years ago with nothing, no family, no support system, no one to call in emergencies. I spent 18 years learning that I was temporary, forgettable, not worth keeping. Then I met Ethan and Mia, and they just chose me. They decided I was worth including, worth helping, worth loving, and they kept choosing me every single day until I finally believed I deserved to be chosen." Her voice broke. "This is more family than I ever imagined having, more love than I thought possible, more home than I knew existed. So thank you for seeing me when the world looked away. Thank you for making space for me in your lives. Thank you for proving that chosen family is just as real, just as permanent, just as powerful as any other kind." There wasn't a dry eye in the cafe. Mrs. Delaney was openly sobbing. Ethan's mother had gone through an entire box of tissues. Even Claire's usually stoic husband was wiping at his eyes. The evening continued with dancing and laughter and the kind of celebration that comes from witnessing love triumph over loss. Mia appointed herself the official photographer, taking dozens of pictures that were mostly blurry but captured something essential about the joy of the day. As the party wound down and guests started leaving, Ethan found a quiet moment with his daughter. "You okay, kiddo? This is a big change." "It's a good change, though." Mia looked across the room at Lena, who was laughing with Claire about something. "I know Mom would be happy. She always wanted us to be okay, and we're more than okay now. We're really, really good." "Yeah, we are." Ethan pulled his daughter close. "I love you, Mia. You know that, right?" "I know, I love you too." She grinned up at him. "And I love that Lena's my mom now. It's like I won the family lottery. I had one awesome mom, and now I have another one. Plus you, plus Grandma and Aunt Claire and everyone else. We're kind of unstoppable." "We really are." The adoption paperwork went through by Christmas, making Lena legally Mia's mother. The day the finalization came through, they celebrated at the cafe. Where else? With hot chocolate and cookies, and the easy joy of a family that had fought hard for its right to exist. Years passed, and their story continued to unfold in the ordinary magic of daily life. Lena's career flourished, her advocacy work expanded, her confidence grew exponentially from that frightened young woman who'd counted out $3 for a cupcake. She started a nonprofit focused on supporting foster youth aging out, turning her personal experience into systemic change that helped hundreds of kids find stability and hope. Mia grew up with two mothers in her heart, one who'd given birth to her and loved her fiercely for 5 years, one who'd chosen her and loved her fiercely for everything after. She learned that family could be complicated and beautiful, that grief and joy could coexist, that love was big enough to hold everyone who deserved to be held. Ethan finally made peace with his grief, learning that moving forward didn't mean forgetting, that new love didn't diminish old love, that his heart was exactly as large as it needed to be to hold everyone he cherished. On a cold February afternoon 5 years after that first Saturday, they returned to Riverside Cafe for Lena's birthday. They'd been coming every year on this day, had made it their own personal tradition. Mrs. Delaney, older now, thinking about retirement, but still the heart of the establishment, brought out a cupcake with a candle, just like always. But this time, when Lena looked at that cupcake, she didn't see scarcity or loneliness. She saw abundance. She saw the family surrounding her, Ethan and Mia, Ethan's mother and Claire's family, Marcus and 2 other former mentees she'd stayed close with, friends from work and the nonprofit. She saw the community she'd built from nothing, the life she'd created despite every obstacle the world had thrown at her. "Make a wish," Mia said, now 12 and growing into someone remarkable and fierce and kind. "I don't need to wish for anything," Lena replied, just like she had 5 years ago. "I have everything I could possibly want." "Make one anyway," Ethan encouraged, his arm around her shoulders. "You never know." So Lena closed her eyes and made a wish. Not for herself this time, but for all the kids still in the system, still counting out change, still eating birthday cupcakes alone. She wished them the same impossible luck she'd found. Someone to see them, someone to choose them, someone to prove that family could be built from scratch with nothing but intention and love. She blew out the candle, and the cafe erupted in cheers and song. Mrs. Delaney produced a full cake. She'd been doing that for years now, the $3 cupcake, just a symbol they kept returning to. They ate and laughed and stayed until closing, just like always. Walking to their car later, Lena's hand in Ethan's, Mia walking ahead checking her phone with the casual confidence of someone who'd never doubted she was loved, Lena said, "Do you ever think about how different things could have been if Mia hadn't insisted on inviting me over that day?" "All the time. But I try not to dwell on it. The what-ifs will drive you crazy." "I just mean, I was so close to not showing up that day, to staying home because it was easier than going out into the world. And if I hadn't gone, if I'd been 5 minutes later or earlier, if I'd chosen a different cafe," she shook her head, "we might never have met. But you did show up, and we did meet, and here we are." "Here we are," Lena repeated, marveling at it, "with everything I never knew I could have." Ethan pulled her close, kissed her temple. Everything we all needed without knowing we needed it. That night, after Mia was asleep and they were getting ready for bed, Lena caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror, really looked at herself in a way she hadn't in years. She saw someone healthy, loved, purposeful, someone who'd survived impossible odds and built something beautiful from the wreckage, someone who'd learned that being chosen was just as powerful as being born into love. She thought about that 18-year-old on the climbing wall, so desperate to escape her pain that she'd taken risks that changed her life permanently. She thought about the young woman who'd spent 7 years convinced she was unlovable, unfixable, destined for isolation. She thought about the person who'd counted out $3 for a single cupcake, expecting nothing more than a brief moment of solitary celebration. "I wish I could tell her," she said quietly, as Ethan came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "That younger version of me. I wish I could tell her it gets better. That love is coming, that family is coming, that everything she's surviving is leading somewhere worth reaching. Maybe she knows somehow. Maybe that's why she kept going even when it hurt, because some part of her believed something better was possible. Maybe." Lena leaned back against her husband, feeling the solid warmth of him, the absolute certainty of being home. "I just hope other kids in her situation find their way to something better too, that they find their Ethan and Mia, their family who chooses them. You're making that more likely every day. Through your work, through your advocacy, through being visible proof that survival is possible." They stood there for a long moment, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds, who'd built a family from shared loneliness and deliberate kindness, who'd learned that love was bigger and more resilient than either of them had imagined. Downstairs, the house was quiet but full of pictures and memories and the accumulated debris of a life fully lived. In Mia's room, a girl slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that she was surrounded by love on all sides. In frames throughout the house, Sarah smiled from photographs, present in her absence, honored by how well the people she'd loved had learned to love again. And in a small cafe across town, Mrs. Delaney locked up for the night, smiling to herself about birthday cupcakes and the way small gestures could change everything. She'd seen it happen right here in her establishment, had watched 3 lonely people find each other and build something that transformed them all. The world outside continued its complicated spin, full of children aging out of foster care with nowhere to go, full of people struggling alone with pain too heavy to carry, full of ordinary moments that could become extraordinary if someone just paid attention. But in this one house, on this one night, there was only peace and love and the profound satisfaction of having survived long enough to find home. Lena fell asleep that night thinking about cupcakes and candles and wishes that came true not through magic but through choice. The choice to see someone struggling, the choice to invite them in, the choice to keep choosing them every single day until loneliness transformed into belonging. In the morning, she'd wake up to coffee and laughter, to Mia's voice calling her mom without hesitation, to Ethan's kiss, and the ordinary miracle of another day with her family. She'd go to work and fight for accessibility, come home to dinner and homework help, spend the evening on the couch with the people she loved most in the world. It was a simple life in many ways, no grand dramas, no fairy tale magic, just the steady accumulation of ordinary moments that added up to extraordinary contentment. But for someone who'd spent years believing she'd never have even the simple things, this ordinary life was everything. The $3 cupcake had led to this: a home, a family, a future that stretched out bright and possible, full of all the things Lena had been too afraid to hope for. And every single day, she chose to show up for it, to accept the love being offered, to believe she deserved it, to let herself be seen and known and cherished. Because that's what Mia had taught her on that cold February afternoon, what Ethan had reinforced with every kind gesture since, what their family proved every single day. Nobody should have to be alone. Not on birthdays, not on ordinary Tuesdays, not ever. Family was the people who saw you struggling and refused to look away, who invited you in and kept inviting you until you finally believed you belonged. And Lena Harper finally, completely believed she belonged.